Let's talk about mutations, also known as changes in the sequence of DNA. How can changing one base impact a person as a whole? So there's two different locations where we can see mutations. Location 1 would be a mutation in our reproductive cells. Gametes are another name for reproductive cells. So thinking of our sperm cells if you are a male or our egg cells if you're a female. So, this is the worst spot to have a genetic mutation because it not only impacts you, but it impacts the generations to come. Because if my egg cell has a mutation, that means every single cell of my child will also have that same mutation. So, mutations in reproductive cells have potential to be harmful because they're passed on the next generation and impact that person or that organism a lot. The second location of mutations are our somatic cells, also known as our body cells. So, any cell that is not a sperm or an egg cell. So, this could cause issues for me as the individual. Could or it could not. Not all mutations are bad. Some are forms of evolution where it could be a benefit. Some could be negative and lead to harm for my body, or some could have no impact at all. But somatic cells, that will only impact me as an individual. So this will not be passed on to offspring necessarily. So let's talk about our nitrogen based mutations first. So the first type is a point mutation, which I think is easy because I can point at the specific nitrogen base that changed. So here I can see my original DNA and I can point and say, all right, this T changed to an A. So I can see the specific nitrogen base that changed from one letter to another. So, here are examples of how point mutations could or could not impact the body. So, I have my original sequence of my mRNA, and I have my protein that is coded for. Below are three different examples of point mutations. So, here I had CAA. I can see this A changed to a G. I can point at the base that changed. And notice my protein is still the exact same. So, although there was a mutation in the DNA and mRNA, nothing actually physically changed for my body. The proteins still form the same. Here's our second example where I can see UCU change to CCU, so I can point at this C that changed. And here I can see that the amino acid changed too. So I know proteins are very specific. So if I change one amino acid, I could change the entire protein. And then the last would be the most harmful. I can see UAU goes to UAA, so I can point at this A that changed. So I have a start and a stop, meaning the protein never even formed. Our next type of nitrogen base is a mutation, is a frame shift mutation, which will shift the entire sequence to the left or the right. So one single base is added or deleted. So here's my original strain of DNA. I can see this G was added. So it's called frame shift because notice my codons. I have my first codon TCG. My second codon was ATT. Now it's AGT. So every single codon to the right of this will now be different because that one base caused all the nitrogen bases to shift over one. Deletion would be the same, except I'm removing. So now instead of having ATT, I have TTT as the second codon. So here's another visual for that. I can see how the frame shift can cause that change. I could accidentally code for a stop codon, meaning the protein wouldn't form. Here I'm missing a U, so all of the amino acids after it would be different. Or sometimes I can insert or delete many amino acids or many nitrogen bases. It doesn't necessarily have to be one, so there could just be one amino acid gone from that. Our other types of mutations are chromosomal mutations. So the chromosomal mutation will be larger than just one nitrogen base. So here's my original chromosome. I just showed it as letters of the alphabet, so A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. So each letter is a gene. So a gene is a small segment of DNA. So deletion for a chromosomal mutation would I'd be deleting a full gene, so a full protein that my body is coded for. So deletion, I'm deleting one or more genes, which can be very harmful. So here I have a picture of a chromosome. I'm breaking that chromosome. I'm deleting some of the genetic material out. So now that genetic material is just missing from the chromosome. They no longer have it. Another type of chromosomal mutation would be inversion. So I remember, I don't know if you guys ever played on these things. I have a picture down here in the bottom left. My uncle had one of these, and my cousin and I used to sit on them and swing upside down, and you invert yourself, and all the blood rushes to your head. But it's kind of the same thing where a set of genes are flipped or inverted to opposite order. So here I can see my picture. I have my chromosome. Here I have the break in the chromosome and it's inverted, so it literally flips upside down and it is reinserted into the chromosome. Another would be insertion. So one or more genes are reinserted. They appear more than one time. So it could be accidentally copied and inserted twice, or you could have an inserted gene come from another chromosome. So here's a form of chromosomal insertion where it's coming from another chromosome. So I can see my purple chromosome, part of it breaks off and it's inserted into the green chromosome, making one shorter and one longer. And then translocation, which kind of goes hand in hand with insertion, is when one or more genes are moved from one chromosome to another and they exchange places. So they kind of break off and then are inserted into each other's chromosomes. So here I have chromosome 4 and chromosome 20. Part of chromosome 4 breaks off, part of chromosome 20 breaks off, and they literally switch places within the chromosomes. So last slide, just possible causes of mutations, x-rays. So if you've ever got an x-ray, you should wear a lead vest because that could lead to cancer and mutations if you don't have that lead vest on. Exposure to UV, ultraviolet light, which I know I'm horrible with this as well, but this is why we should be wearing sunscreen in order to block that UV. Freckles, tan, that's actually just skin damage. So we need to be loading up on the sunscreen. I need to take my own advice. Exposure to harmful chemicals, so mutagens, factories releasing chemicals. I know in my hometown there was a factory releasing chemicals into the water and people didn't know, and then people started to get sick, so that could lead to mutations. And then unhealthy lifestyle, so smoking, drugs, even the vape pens that I know were a fad are very bad. There's actually been many deaths linked to that from the mutations from inhaling the vitamin E. So just different causes of mutations. Mutations could be very negative. They could sometimes be beneficial, or they could sometimes have no impact on the body.